this is a lot of fun, Joshua, because it's been over a decade that we've known each other in the blogosphere world and in the intrawebs, as I like to call them. So it's great to connect with you again, man.
It is fabulous. One of my oldest friends online in the blogging world. So
Yeah,
wonderful. So
it had to be
good.
over 15 years ago that we crossed paths on some collaborative thing that I'm sure there was a bundle sale or something.
I started blogging 15, will be 16 years in
Okay.
May of this year. So you about
Okay.
that same time, or you started before me?
I think maybe a year before you is when I was blogging, and then the
All right.
podcasting's been going on 12 and a half. So,
All right. Long enough that you could teach me everything I needed to know.
well, we'll see how that goes. But I'm so fascinated by your journey, man, because it seems like when you're talking about just the idea of becoming minimalist and the idea of minimalism, that can mean a lot of different things, right? To different people. People here uh, and interpret that in a lot of different ways. But how has this gone with you of the arc of your journey with this message and this path? Catch people up.
Well, gosh, yeah, that's a long question. I'll just want me to take the whole half hour on that, catching up? No. So I found minimalism, like I mentioned, 16 years ago. My son was 5 and my daughter was 2, and now they are 21 and almost 18. And so it's been very interesting seeing the different family stages of minimalism in my life, starting out when they were just kids and now they're adults and making their own decisions and trying to navigate all of that, having moments in my time where I was super passionate about getting rid of a lot of things, and other times in my life where still writing about it, but not quite as vigilant around home. And then how did we get here? And, wanted to go back through rooms and minimize some stuff. And anyway, I found minimalism 15 and a half years ago. We got rid of 60-70% of our stuff. Just found that we started living a more intentional life, focused on things that matter most. Maybe a year and a half after that, I did my first newspaper interview, and I remember the interviewer asking me, is this just a phase you're going through, or is this something you're going to stick to for the rest of your life? And I said, I'm never going back to buying a bunch of stuff that I don't need. I'm never going back to unintentional consumeristic living. And so now 15 years later, being able to see that was true, it's been pretty wonderful.
So what have you seen as the fruits of that path, personally, relationally, familially, however you want to go? Because there's another, like, my experience has also been there's an unexpected gains from these kinds of choices. So what's played out for you?
Yeah, there are, I think, expected and then unexpected consequences, and then maybe even like longer term things that I've noticed in my life now after this phrase. So like at the very beginning, like when we started owning fewer things, buying fewer things, like owning, and our goal was never just to own the fewest amount of things as possible. Like our definition of minimalism has always been, we want to focus our lives on things that are most important by removing anything that distracts us from our greatest values and pursuits. And we could see, like pretty early on as we began this, that, hey, the less I own, the more time we're going to have to spend with our kids, the more time that we're going to have together. Like we're not just going to have to be wasting our evenings cleaning things and weekends clearing out the garage. And so we found more time for one another. We found more money for one another, less stress and more freedom, just a very more intentional life. As our kids got older, I could start to see how, hey, the money that we're saving on not buying things, we've done really 2 things with in our life. Number one, we started a nonprofit. And so we became much more generous than we were before because we had the money to do it. The second thing is that we use a lot of that money to do vacations and trips and experiences with our kids rather
Right.
than going to go buy a
Right.
bigger screen television. Like, let's, go spend a weekend somewhere and see the world and make these memories. And everything they say about experiences bringing more happiness than possessions is absolutely true. Like, my son's 21, and we can talk about trips that we took and meals that we experienced 12 years ago. And it just
Mm-hmm.
brings us together every time around the table. Um, and then the kind of the longer term one that I'm noticing, and just now in my stage of life, I'm almost 50. Like, there are some friends, there's some people in our lives that like never adopted a minimalist philosophy, and just seems like we're buying everything for themselves, for their kids. Like, the economy has really hit them pretty hard,
Mm-hmm.
um, and they're left with like at the max of their credit cards, and like very stressed lifestyle. And we've had a few rougher years during COVID, but never a huge economic downturn on our financial end. But even if we were, like, we're in a much more stable
Right.
financial position now than if we would have been before. So that's a long answer to how has
Yeah,
it
that's
benefited our
that's
life. But it's
that.
interesting as I kind of think through the 15 years of it, and like immediate, and then, hey, here's some shorter term things that we're really seeing paying off long term. And now 15 years later, like, it's changed my life in so many ways. It's tough to even notice, but I can picture out that one for sure.
Yeah, because it's almost like, and I think this might be. Tell me if this has been your experience too. Because working with people, this is something I've lived as well with the minimalism idea. I came across it with Leo. Zen Habits was probably one of the first ones,
Yeah.
and then way back there was I think the guy's name was David Bruno, the 100 Thing
Mm-hmm.
Challenge. Talked to him
Yeah.
way back too. Did that and really recognized there was a lightness to life that way. But then what I come across though with people still is it's sometimes a hard to let go of things to do this, right? Because there's different aspects of meaning attached to things, particularly when you add in sentimentality. But I love the way you've gone about this because it mirrors ours in a lot of ways, where it's like we want to have essential things, like make them good things, enjoy what we have that are things, but then recognize life has a whole lot more that than just things. And I almost hear you saying what it's done is it's helped you clear out the immediate, so that way the important stays more towards the top.
Yeah, it's an opportunity to, because I think that's the one thing that people miss, is I think people miss how their possessions, the things that we own, actually keep us away from fully walking in our purpose and in our
Mm-hmm.
values. Like, I can see, oh, I shouldn't be consumeristic. I shouldn't be materialistic. I shouldn't be buying all these things. But then they're in my home, and it's like, well, why would I get rid of them when they're in my home? And I don't think people notice just the weight that our things have on us.
Mm-hmm.
The way I say it is, like, everything we own takes up physical space in our home, but it also takes up mental space in our mind. Like everything we
Mm-hmm.
own is something that we're responsible for, and we have to handle at some point in our lives. And until we do, it just
Yeah,
weighs
that
on us.
yeah, that's the thing. Everything we own owns us
Yeah,
in some way, in some way for sure. So,
yeah.
what do you do when you come across the people that one person definitely resonates with this, and yet their spouse doesn't? Because this is a common occurrence.
Yeah, it is, and there are no easy answers to this question. It's probably the
Mm-hmm.
question that I get asked the most often, and I usually respond, if I knew how to get your spouse to do everything you wanted them to do, I'd be writing a different book, because that would that would probably sell pretty well.
Yes,
How
it
do I get
would.
my kids to do everything I want them to do? And so,
Yeah.
like, there are no easy answers. We always lead with I think three things: love and patience and humility. Like especially in a marriage relationship. So like if we're just dating someone and this is becoming a struggle or a point of contention, then I think there's a legitimate question of, is this the person I should be spending the rest of my life with?
Right.
Because that would be the
That's
point
good
of
data.
dating, right?
Yeah, that's
Like
good data.
deciding if our values are going to line up. But if you're in a marriage relationship, then we're leading with love. We're leading with commitment and faithfulness. And hey, I'm not leaving at all. I love you, and we're staying together. Patience, um, in that, hey, this is maybe something that you're learning. Like this is a phase of uh, personal growth or development that you stumbled upon and you're seeing the benefit of. And so that doesn't mean that your spouse is being challenged in the same thing at the same time. Like
Right.
maybe they're growing somewhere else and in some other way. And so being able to notice that, patience, you handle your own things and you lead by example. And on some level, it's unfair for you to tell your spouse that they have to get rid of the things that they don't need if you're still holding on to some things that you don't need. Like
Right.
it's a very high bar to say I've gotten rid of everything that I don't need before I ask my spouse. But really, if I'm keeping a bunch of stuff in some back closet somewhere, then maybe I don't have the footing to be telling my spouse that they need to do a better job. And then humility, and by humility I mean, like, you're not perfect in the relationship. There's probably something that your spouse wants you to change in your life, and you're not budging on that, whatever that issue might be. And so I think seeing it from the same way and say,
Yeah.
okay, there's some things where we both need to grow. So love, patience, humility, but honestly,
Yeah.
like in a more practical way, I think we lead by example. We get rid of things that we don't need. We do our own stuff. We show the benefits of owning less. Like truly, in the long run, the benefits of owning just what you need will always win out over wasting a lot of money buying stuff that you don't need and keeping stuff that you don't need. And so maybe it takes a little while for them to see that, but in the long run, this lifestyle wins out. And then we approach the conversation with the right words. I always say, like, the
Hmm.
thing that drew you to owning less, the benefits that you could notice in your home and in your life, might be different than what would draw your spouse to the idea
Yeah.
of owning less. And so thinking that through, and then making sure the conversations aren't when you can't find the spatula and you're really mad and why do you own all this stuff. Like, that's not a helpful time to have the conversation. But
So context matters all the
yeah.
time. But I love the idea, just to reiterate it, in the sense of I live mine, right? I live what's important to me. Like when I did the 100 thing challenge 15 years ago or whatever it was, I set up that all over the weekend when no one was here. Pam and the kids were gone. And so I spent the whole weekend drilling down my personal items into 100 things or less. Everything else was in a box or boxes in the garage, just out of the way. And so when Pam came home, the closet was completely different. On, wow, look at, she actually, her quote, direct quote, look at how much space I have now for my
Yeah.
things, right? I'm like, perfect, do what you choose, baby. And then lo and behold, within not too long of a time, she's like, I need to really go through a bunch of this stuff, don't I? Like, well, that's up to
Yeah.
you. But yes, I think you did. But it's just that element of I just live what's in meaningful and impactful for me, and that rubs off sometimes.
Yeah. And sometimes it happens right away. Like
Hmm.
sometimes it happens the first month, and sometimes it happens a year, and sometimes it takes 5 years. I had a lady at a conference one time as I was, talking about this, and she raised her hand and she said, for 5 years, I have been living this life wanting my husband to notice the benefits. And just last month, she said, he finally said, I think this thing you're talking about makes sense to me. Sometimes I think we want to lead by example, but we only want to be a month or two. And,
Right. I don't
sometimes
want to
it
be
takes,
that far ahead.
sometimes it
Yes.
takes a long time. And a lot of times it's motivated by love. I mean, it can be motivated by one or two things. Like it can be motivated by frustration and we're just sick of our spouse's stuff and why can't you change? But hopefully it's, hey, I want what's best for you. And I know that, what's best for us, what's best for our family isn't that we're holding on to all these items. And I
Yeah.
think when it's love based, you find some solutions and you find some
Yeah.
ideas and some tools and some ways to help your spouse
Yeah,
through
so
that.
let's pivot towards just because I think it's where one of the best places is to land is the idea of on the marital side of things when this plays out, because this is where it can be. Obviously, if I'm doing this as a family and I'm a parent doing it, I can set a different kind of example and a little bit of a different kind of pressure, almost dare I say edict in some
Mm-hmm.
ways, if we as parents are the ones that hold the purse strings at least. But when you're talking about on the marital side of things, one of the things you've talked about before is the idea of the master bedroom and how the importance of that room in and of itself, if you will, being a metaphor of of minimalism and meaning and importance. So speak to that for a bit.
Yeah, perfect. You're right, and a good podcast to have the conversation on about the master bedroom. Hey, I'm here to talk about anything you want, but if we want to talk about minimalism, that's fine. Um, Number one, there are one of two rooms that I always encourage people to start their minimizing or just decluttering. Like if you don't want to call it minimalism,
Mm-hmm.
that's fine. Like just decluttering, getting rid of the things that you don't need. I always encourage starting in the living room or the bedroom. And the reason is because a lot of people think about wanting to declutter, wanting to own less, and like their mind races to the attic or the garage, the basement, or like, how would I ever get rid of my photos? And it's like, well, we don't have to start in the hardest
Right.
spot
Right.
in your home. Like if you start in an easier space where you can see some wins and make progress, an area that you spend time in, then you'll be more motivated to keep going. So living room and bedroom are great examples. Another concept that I talk a lot about in my book, The Minimalist Home, is setting the purpose of a room, like defining what the purpose of your space. What is the purpose of my living room? What is the purpose of my kitchen? What is the purpose of my bedroom? And then think through, so what things do I need in that room in
Mm-hmm.
order to fulfill the purpose? And what are all the things hanging out in the room that actually make the room less useful and less purposeful? And so the bedroom is a great example because the bedroom serves two purposes. Like it's for rest and it's for intimacy. And I mean, some people have their home office in their bedroom, but generally speaking, like it's for rest and it's for intimacy. And so, what are the things in your bedroom that you're just keeping around that are actually detracting from
Right.
rest and are detracting from intimacy? And take those things out and put them in the rooms where they're supposed to live so that this one room can serve its function better. It's also a great place for talking about kids again. Like it's a great place for married couples with kids because it's kind of a space that you get to have for your own, and not that the kids are
Mm-hmm.
never in there, but like it's where you go when the kids are in bed, and like it's
Right.
our space that we get to control. And so I would encourage anyone, like, hey, you're right, we do need to do some decluttering around here, we do need to make some changes around here. I would start in the bedroom and I would say,
Yeah.
let's take everything out of here that doesn't help us do those two things better.
And
And then
I would even add
when
on.
those two things are clicking, then
Yeah.
family looks a lot better in a lot of ways.
It absolutely does, and I even add on the component because I think one of the ways to think about like you're describing is how do you make that room, the master bedroom, a sanctuary for the couple. But then I think there's also importance to how do you protect it, even with the conversations that take place. If you have the really difficult financial conversations, don't do them in the
Mm,
bedroom because there's an energy associated with that that's clutter, if you will, and there's tension. And sometimes it's not practical. I totally understand that. That's the only place we can get away and have these conversations. Get it. But what you can do to like you're describing of making a purpose of what's the purpose of every room, I think there's a spiritual component to this, an emotional component to it as well, of protecting what really is important, like you described at the very beginning of how do I keep what matters most in focus.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant.
That's good, man. I appreciate. I'm just trying to keep up here.
You should be an expert.
Oh well, I'll see
No,
what I can do.
that's so true. That's so true. I've never extended it to the conversations that we have in those rooms, but especially the bedroom.
Well, I just know that
it's good.
we used to at times pay bills back there, right? Because that was just the easiest way to lay everything out. And here you go. And then it kind of dawned on us: I don't like doing this, so I don't want this associated with this room. Let's do it. Let's move it out someplace else.
Yeah.
And it's just a helpful guide, I think. But it's just I love the simplicity of this, man, because you're just talking about how am I harnessing what matters most and protecting that with all the things that go on that are war against it. And what your whole mission seems to have become is I just need to be more mindful of what's pulling away from it. If I can just remove those things, that's more than half the battle.
Yeah. Yeah. And in that way, we don't just protect the things, like we elevate them, we devote more of our thoughts towards them and more of our time and more of our money and energy towards those values that matter in the long run.
Yeah, that's so good, man. So how can people find you? Because I know you've been doing this for a long time, but what's the easiest way to find you and the work, the books, the different things you've got?
Well, I have been doing this for a long time. BecomingMinimalist.com has been home base for 15 years, and that's still the best place to go. Do a lot of different things, have 3 books. Things That Matter is the most recent book from a couple of years ago, and have different courses and different things that I have. But it all kind of runs through BecomingMinimalist.com. So I would send people there. It's good to see you again.
It's so great, man. Thanks for the time and the continued sticking with this work. It's so great.
How do you look younger? How do you look younger? How do you pull that off?
I got rid of the goatee. That's how.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
All right, man. Hey, thanks so much.
Yes. Good to see you.